Okay, new year, new theme. Here we go. Yay! Thanks, Nicole. But I want to start as a way into this theme, asking, when you'll find out what the theme is soon, asking a question. So the question is, why are we here? And I don't mean that in the way that Kai's responding, which is like this big existential, who put us on this earth? Was it God? Was it, I don't mean that. I mean, why have we come here tonight? Why did we come to the Buddhist Center? What's brought us here? Why are we here? Tonight you might say, well, to learn more about Buddhism, to connect with the Sangha, to go deeper in my practice of the Dharma. But why? Why are we doing this? Why are we here? Why did you come here? For me, I would say I came to the center. The reason I would have gave was something along the lines of my life stopped working. That's the sort of what it felt like at the time. I had this great plan to become this great mathematician. It was going to be great. I was going to just be doing something I loved and make loads of money off it. Well, not loads actually, but I'd enjoy it. I tried to make success and being really good at something my life goal, and it didn't work. And I was left with this question, well, what do I do with my life? And pretty soon after that, this thought occurred to me, which was, I bet the Buddhists could help with that. So then I came here, and now here I am. Anyway, that's a bit about me, but whatever your reason might be, they all have something in common. We might say they all have something in common, something underlying all these reasons why we might be here, and which we might call the wish to be happy. And the wish to be happy. I'm using the word happy very loosely, and I'm not going to define what I mean by that. You could substitute all kind of words for this word happy, like fulfilled, content, inner peace, freedom, love, all kinds of words of what we feel like we might be seeking. But whatever we call it, we all want it, whatever that might be. The desire, this desire for whatever we call it is fundamental to what it means to be human. It's what's driving us all the time. We might even, this fundamental kind of drive within us to want to be happy is, I think, it's so fundamental that we might not always be aware of it, or we might even, we might have learned to deny that, or to convince ourselves that's not what we're about. That's not what's driving us. We may think we're not allowed to be happy, or we're not good enough, or whatever it might be. But if you look just beneath the surface, you will find, money back guaranteed, I think, that something of this is going on. We're always seeking some kind of happiness, some kind of fulfillment. Even when we're positively forgetting ourselves, perhaps through acts of service, benefiting others, we're being driven on by the deep fulfillment, freedom and satisfaction that comes from those selfless modes of being. We have this weird thing in our society of, don't be selfish, isn't that a bit selfish? Or anyway, that's there. So this drive or longing to be happy, whatever we call it, it's natural. It's our existential situation. However, there's a problem. So, that's all good, that's fine. But there's a problem. The problem is that we may have all found, at least probably loads of times, we get it wrong. We get it wrong. We get it wrong a lot, all the time even. We want to be happy, but we get it wrong. Shantideva, who's an 8th century Buddhist monk who wrote this incredible piece of work called the Bodhicharyavatara, he has a verse which expresses this really well. He says, although we long to be rid of suffering, we run towards suffering itself. Although we desire happiness, out of ignorance, we destroy our own happiness as if it was our enemy. So in what way do we get it wrong? There's many ways we could talk about this. Buddhism has all kinds of ways of talking about ignorance, delusion, as we might call it, the ways we act in ways that don't do the things we want it to do. We want to be happy, and it has the opposite effect. I'm going to approach this in a particular way based on a lecture that Sangharakshita, who founded our movement, he gave back in the 60s before the movement and order was even founded, he gave this lecture called Nirvana. It's part of a much larger series introducing Buddhism. It's also adapted and edited in the book, What is the Dharma? For those of you interested, in a chapter called The Psychology of Goal Setting. So he expresses this predicament, this problem, in a very direct, non-kind of jargon sort of way. And it goes something like this. So this is me summarizing his presentation. It's an amazing lecture, an amazing chapter. I remember actually reading it for the first time while I was living at Padmaloka and felt like I was struck by a lightning bolt and had like 2 of the happiest hours of my life, interestingly, straight afterwards. While I was chopping vegetables, it was great. Anyway, it goes something like this. So first, we're unhappy. Maybe not literally all the time, we're not literally miserable all the time. Sometimes might be, but we might not be. But if we're really honest, underneath that, there's this deep underlying thread of us not being truly fulfilled and satisfied, at the very least. Then we go looking for happiness, the natural thing to do. And in searching for happiness, we will some way or another stumble across some description or presentation of happiness that particularly appeals to us. And we think, yes, that's what I need, that's what I want. So perhaps most commonly, for a good chunk of our lives, that will, for many of us, have taken the form or still take the form of looking for happiness. Might feel a bit impoverished, a bit unfulfilled, looking for happiness in possessing the best stuff, getting the best job, finding the perfect partner. In other words, rearranging the whole outside world to match what our perfect vision of life will be, where there's no suffering. So that might be one way we kind of see where happiness lies. However, you may come along to a Buddhist center and then learn other ways, or kind of more helpful ways of seeing the vision of where happiness might lie. So, in a more spiritual and ethical dimension, in a way. So, and usually it reflects, our particular experience of unhappiness and suffering usually reflects what it is we most long for. So if our particular dissatisfaction feels like a sense of being trapped or confined, then we might feel drawn towards and inspired by visions of freedom and expansiveness. If we feel perhaps isolated and lonely more acutely, we may be drawn towards this vision of love and connection with all life and each other, and see fulfillment lying there. Or if we feel perhaps often a slave to our addictions and cravings, and that's what we find most painful, then we might imagine happiness being a state of complete contentment and inner peace. And that's all fantastic. They're all really fantastic visions and things to aspire towards. That's all well and good. However, and this is where we get it wrong, what we then usually do, this is how Sangharakshita speaks in this lecture, or this is me summarizing my understanding of it. What we then usually do, we set up this state of being happy as a goal outside of ourselves, and in one way or another, sort of try and get it, just muscle our way towards it. Go for it, get the thing. In other words, we grasp after it because that's how we operate. That's our ignorance. We grasp after a particular goal of happiness, even try and grasp enlightenment, whilst, again, really significantly, whilst ignoring or even trying to bypass going deeper into what the actual underlying causes and conditions of our unhappiness actually are. So that was a bit of a mouthful. So, whilst ignoring and even trying to bypass going deeper into what the actual underlying causes and conditions of our happiness actually are. And this is what, I don't know, but I remember seeing a book called The Happiness Trap, and I wonder if this is something in that terrain. We can get caught in always running for something that we don't have, that we believe we can get if we just keep going for it. In other words, you may have heard this image before. We take our particular goal of happiness, whatever that looks like for us, we turn it into a carrot, we hang it from a string on a stick, maybe we stick the stick to our head or something, so it's hanging in front of us, and then we run after it. And you can imagine what happens. The carrot's still there. I somehow imagine it on like a treadmill, because then you're just moving on the spot as well, and the carrot's not moving. You're not actually moving. We really want the carrot, don't we? I really want the carrot. I want that carrot so bad. I want that version of me that I imagine, that if I get there, I won't suffer. I won't suffer. I won't feel so afraid. I won't feel whatever, all that stuff that's difficult and painful. But as you probably know, we never reach the carrot. The whole time we're trying to run towards this happiness carrot, we need a better word for that, but anyway, reaching and reaching for it and not getting it, the whole time we're running towards this carrot, we're only running away from ourselves. We're just running away from ourselves. This is one way of expressing what Buddhism calls craving. Craving. Craving, it's much deeper than just wanting a bit of chocolate and a bit of TV and phone time and like distracting stimulation. That's part of it. That's the outer expression. But craving, you might say, in this broader sense, in the sense that the way Buddhism talks about it in the first and second noble truth, craving is more this deeply held strategy of seeking happiness and fulfillment by, and this is how Sangharakshita puts it, wishing that things be other than they actually are. So craving, he says, is the natural but painful desire of wishing that things were other than they actually are. And this state of craving is itself suffering. Yeah, it's dukkha, as we call it in dukkha, suffering, unsatisfactoriness. Whatever carrot we put on the stick, even if it's enlightenment, it'll still just remain that carrot that we're chasing, unless we make a fundamental shift in the whole way that we're approaching it. This is a subtle and significant point. So what can we do instead? How can we shift our approach? Well, you ready? I'm just going to have a drink. The alternative is awareness. This is sort of this is how Sangharakshita speaks about in this lecture, nirvana. The alternative is awareness, learning to be aware, learning to be more deeply aware of ourselves, more deeply aware of the world around us, of each other, and of reality. So rather than being driven by grasping after various goals, strategies, all that yearning and scheming, if only I could be like this, then I'd be happy. If only I could get that, it'll all be great. We can choose instead to bring about a radical shift in our whole mode of being and our whole way that we're trying to live our life by entrusting ourselves to awareness. And this says, he says this begins firstly by fully accepting who we are and how we are. Just really accepting that, including our unhappiness. If we're unhappy, really accepting, yes, I'm unhappy. This is how I am right now. And then taking the next step, this bold and courageous step of committing ourselves to becoming more and more aware of what the underlying causes and conditions of our unhappiness actually are, which is no small thing. And really, that's the whole Buddhist path is contained in there in a particular sense, from a particular lens, going deeper and deeper into what is our suffering, why is it there, and from that emerging something beyond, something more. And the whole Buddhist path is a training in developing and deepening awareness in all its many dimensions. You might even say, awareness, mindfulness, because I'm going to be using this word mindfulness as well, along with awareness, quite interchangeably. It's the keystone of the Dharma, of the Buddhist teachings. Everything kind of hangs around awareness. There's no awareness, there's no Dharma practice, and growth is a growth in and through awareness. So it's really fundamental. Equally, those of you that are here for last year's theme, Living with Kindness, I could have almost said replaced awareness with kindness for a lot of this. Hopefully by the end of the theme or sooner, we'll find out that they're not two separate things. Just to say, in case you're worried. Kindness is also fundamental to this, but can't talk about everything at once. Okay, so this whole Sangonite series are going to be exploring mindfulness, awareness in all its many levels, all its dimensions, how we put it into practice, where it leads. There's so much, really. Yeah, like I said, we can talk about the whole Buddhist path through this lens of awareness. Straight away, though, I feel like it's really important to say, I think particularly if we're using this word mindfulness, it's so much more than what we might usually think it is, and how this word has been coined and used in the modern world, which is fantastic that, that there's more people benefiting from from mindfulness, from this practice. But Buddhist mindfulness, in the fullest sense, is much more than what we might usually think it is. So forget everything you think you know about mindfulness. That's my advice. I'm gonna try and do that. Well, not straight. I need to give the talk first, so maybe not straight away. Let's forget everything we think we know about mindfulness. Start afresh and just approach every week of this next few weeks with beginner's mind and curiosity, and see what we can learn. So, what is mindfulness? So, the Buddha has something to say about mindfulness. So in a book called the Dhammapada, which is a really fantastic little book of sayings of the Buddha, and there's some have reported by scholars think it's some of the earliest recordings of what the Buddha, gets pretty close to what the Buddha might have actually said and taught. And you can just get really punchy Dharma teaching straight from the Buddha. So I really recommend getting a copy of the Dhammapada if you don't have one. Chapter 2 of the Dhammapada is on mindfulness. Verse 1 of that chapter reads, so this is the Buddha, mindfulness is the way to the deathless, unmindfulness the way to death. Those who are mindful do not die, whereas the unmindful are like the dead. I'm going to put that here just so it's screaming at you in the face for the next few minutes. No, it's not screaming. You can find out what it's doing to you. Anyway, yes, mindfulness is the way to the deathless. So, firstly, I'm going to say a bit about this, so a bit about what we mean by deathless. But firstly, mindfulness here is actually a translation of a word appamada, a Pali word appamada. Just to say, I'm going to mention a few Pali words, which Paramita will be giving a full-length talk on next week. So you can write it down then, because I'm not going to talk too much about this today. But appamada, which translates as mindfulness, literally means non-heedlessness, something like heedfulness. It means something like being in a state where we're aware and awake to what is of true value, like true ethical and spiritual value and significance. Particularly ethically and spiritually. There's another 2 Pali words, which again Paramita will talk more about next week, which, when those are drawn out as well, gives a more of a fuller picture of what mindfulness is, which includes a state of being fully present, alive and awake to what is happening right now, physically, though through our senses. That's what we normally think when we hear mindfulness. But as well as that, being aware of our overarching purpose in whatever we're doing. Could be a very practical purpose, but particularly being in contact with our larger spiritual vision. So it's mindfulness in this fullest sense, in this full, broad sense. Really, all these dimensions of mindfulness, you can't really have one without having the other, but it's mindfulness in this fullest sense, which the Buddha is evoking, and which the Buddhist tradition is trying to evoke. That leads to the deathless, which is a synonym for nirvana or enlightenment. That which is beyond birth and death. So at the time of the Buddha, the goal of the spiritual life was presented along kind of in a backdrop of the people of the time. For them, they expressed their kind of big existential situation as being kind of destined to repeat an endless round of rebirth, death, rebirth, coming back again and again and again. And they saw this as a problem. Many of us might think, wow, wouldn't that be great? I don't know. But they saw this as just, however much happiness you might experience, inevitably there'll be intense suffering experienced through that process that we will not be able to avoid. And that will just go on and on and on. We might not relate to this, but the essential message I want to draw out from this verse is that the Buddha is saying that awareness, mindfulness, is the way to what we might call it, capital I, capital T. Some might call it God or reality or universal consciousness or enlightenment, Buddha mind. We could put all kinds of words there. I'm just going to call it for now. So it's that, that's something that as human beings, we're all, whether we know it or not, in one way or another, are all trying to find our way towards, come into relation with. The Buddha is saying that mindfulness is the way. It's not a way, it's the way. There's no alternative. There's no other way to get closer to it. This is true whether you're Buddhist or not. Yeah. So awareness, there's something fundamental about awareness for truly fulfilled human and significant spiritual life. But as we've already explored a bit, you can't get to it by setting it up as a goal in the way we usually do. So we use this word goal, but we're not always so conscious that we're using a word that's has particular meanings, connotations, has particular practical significance, and we're using it in the spiritual sphere where things like that don't always apply, as we've already explored. So setting it up as a goal in the way we usually do probably won't work, but nonetheless, awareness takes us there. I've got a metaphor for this. It's a kind of a bit of a rehash of a metaphor I used on the recent Sangha retreat, but in a different way. So it's as if we're a great ship or a galleon. I'm going to be using this metaphor slightly differently. So those of you that were on the retreat, you get more joy and delight from this metaphor of being a ship, hopefully. So it's as if, we ourselves are this great ship or this great galleon. And often it's like we're spending a lot of time drawing maps, locked away in our cabin, perhaps our cabin captain's quarters, making all these careful plans, all this to really, we think we know where the island is, where we're going to find the treasure. So we make all these plans, we make all these schemes. We go out, we grip the helm, we try and steer towards the island. We're gripping, holding tight. Storms are raging. We're going to keep going. We're going to get there. There's all there's other people on the ship, and we're just whipping them and saying, "Come on, do this, do that. Help me get to this place." At some point, we're so focused and determined, but then we get burned out. So we just go back to the cabin's quarters and play Xbox. I don't know what would you have on the ship? Tablet. Do what you like, basically. But anyway, you go off and what's the point? But then eventually, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get to the island where the treasure is. But as I said, it doesn't work. You just go around in circles. We think we're at the island. It's not there. Where's the island? But if we make an effort to enter into awareness, it's as if this great light, this new energy, this new light can come in. This ego-based kind of slave-driving navigator can let go of the helm, and this light of awareness can instead somehow magically steer the ship for us. It's as if the blessings of the Buddhas, can come down, reach, grab the helm, and take us in some new direction that we're not familiar with, that we perhaps don't expect. It's scary, and it might be exhilarating even. It's unfamiliar. We don't know where we're going to go. We don't know when we'll get there, but deep down we feel that we've found the true wind. We're on the true path. And in one way or another, all will be well. And as the Buddha says, the alternative is unmindfulness, to be like the dead. I'm imagining the ship now full of skeletons, zombies even. No leader, permeated by grey mist. It's a state of unawareness, being like the dead, not being truly alive. I've always been terrified of zombies. I've got nothing else to say about that, but anyway, I have. There might be a point there. So, what's it like to be aware? Next question. Explored a bit of this larger vision. So, what's mindfulness like? It's really important, I think, to get a felt sense of things like this. It's really easy, particularly when we're using this word mindfulness. We might have an idea of something that's quite cool, quite, we're just sort of watching from a distance. We're not really involved. There's this like definition given often, isn't it, of like being aware of what's happening without judging. And that, there's a really important element of mindfulness there. But it can give an impression of something that's a bit distant, a bit cool, which is definitely what it's not. So in another lecture called Mind Reactive and Mind Creative, which is a fantastic Sangharakshita lecture, he kind of frames the whole Dharma life in terms of two tendencies of the mind. We have the reactive mind and we have the creative mind, which are actually other ways of talking about the unaware mind and the aware mind. The reactive mind, the unaware mind, all it can do is react. It just repeats patterns. So this is what we might sometimes call the small mind. Our reactive mind, when we're in our reactive mind, we might think we're doing all kinds of interesting things, but actually we're never having an original thought or action that's truly our own. Everything is on autopilot, completely determined by what's happening to us, whether that's coming from the outside or even coming from inside, from our past conditioning. Sangharakshita says quite soberingly that this is the state that most of us are in all the time. Oh, a lot of the time. Is it all? We're in most of the time, so it's not that bad. Just reacting, having our buttons pushed, craving, grasping, oh, I don't like that, get away, oh, I do want that, and get, pulled towards. We hear about this in week 2 of the intro course. And this is represented by the image of the wheel, which has this elaborate version, the Tibetan wheel of life. But more fundamentally, it's just sort of the circle, which I'm going to draw for you. I mean, I know you know what a circle looks like, but I think it has a particular effect. Because it's not just a circle, it's a sort of... So this is what we do. Is it clear? Oh, okay. Anyway, that's the reactive mind. No, it's not. We never get anywhere. We're just repeating old habits, patterns, getting deeper and deeper in those same ruts. The creative mind, however, the aware mind, is this state of mindful awareness. We're able to actually make choices. It creates this gap, as we hear about it, a gap where we're not reacting and we can make a choice and set up new creative patterns and habits. We can recreate ourselves and our whole experience of life. But not only that, so I think we can go further than this. Even if we're not consciously making new decisions or saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to try this new habit, whatever it might be, the state of awareness itself is inherently creative. So every second being aware, truly aware, and again, we'll hopefully learn more and more what this kind of means throughout the series, but while we're dwelling in awareness, that in itself is recreating ourselves. It's sowing seeds of skillful states of mind. It's creating a channel even for the blessings of the Buddha to come through. It's quite a magical and mysterious thing. I heard a story about, it's a sort of story from a second-hand story. Somebody, anyway, who might have even been an order member, who really struggled with anger, had this repeating pattern of getting really angry and it being really unpleasant, went to see Sangharakshita and said, what do I do? Keep getting angry. And he said, bring awareness to it. And then I think it goes something like, really? Is that all? Yes, just bring awareness to it. No big strategy of do this, do that. If you tried punching a pillow or I don't know, whatever it might be, bring awareness to it. So this radical approach of not jumping to fix, not getting caught in thinking, I'm going to find the solution that's going to make it all better, but becoming more deeply aware. What is the underlying cause there? What is here? But just the act of bringing awareness to our states of mind allows transformation to happen straight away. Not straight away, but transformation begins straight away. I found myself that there's been some of my greatest moments of clarity and unexpected sort of vision has arisen when I've just really been able to be relaxed into awareness, particularly on retreats, into my body, to my broader experience, just being with what's there, no agenda. And it's as if sometimes something just comes in from the side. You may have had similar experiences, perhaps. Something can come in that, where did that come from? Was it me? Where was it? But it's there, and life's different now. It's the power and the mystery of awareness. So the creative mind is the alive mind. I'm going to read you this quote. Might go a little bit over time, but I really want to read you this quote. So this is Sangharakshita evoking the state of awareness in his book, Living with Awareness, which is an amazing book. Anyway, he says, imagine a day of unfettered inspiration and free-flowing energy, a day in which you are able to be completely true and clear in your communication, a day in which you felt so real a connection with others that your own concerns ceased to loom so balefully over your life. A day in which you never felt as though you were banging your head against a brick wall or getting stuck in a rut. Imagine such a day of creative freedom, and imagine that freedom doubled or trebled and continuing to expand, and you will start to get an idea of the nature of enlightenment. So the state of awareness is a state of being truly alive. And it's the symbol we're given of this is the spiral. So unlike the wheel, which goes round and round and round, we have the spiral, which, as well as going round, we're perhaps repeating similar conditions in our life, similar routines. It's also going up. It's going up and up and up. It's creating and creating new and more positive and expansive states of mind. It all arises from this fundamental act of just being aware, being mindfully aware. So how can we do this? So I'm going to give you a little bit of homework. It's not actually quite the end of the talk, but I'm going to give you it now anyway. I normally do it at the end, but I'm going to give it now. So the practice that I want to invite you all to do is to try learning to stop. Practice the art of doing nothing. And when I say doing nothing, I mean doing nothing. I don't just mean not doing useful things and like spending your whole day doing box sets or something, but literally sitting and doing nothing else but just being with yourself. If we don't feel free to do this, if we don't feel free to stop and be with ourselves, then in some way or another, the reactive mind will always have a hold over us. Our attempts to be aware will always be invaded by this imperative desire to stay busy at all costs, to not be with ourselves, or to be aware of ourselves. So I invite you this week, set aside 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, put it in your diary, sit in a chair, do nothing, see what happens. Don't even try to be aware, because that's, you might try and do something. Don't want you to try to do anything. Just sit and do nothing and see what happens. You may find it's not easy, but Sangharakshita says, apparently, I don't know where he says this, but I've heard it a number of times, boredom is a gateway to the transcendental, a gateway to the deathless even. It's a dragon guarding treasure, but we have to stay with the dragon for the treasure to be revealed to us. Okay, so some concluding points. So making the shift from the reactive mind to the creative mind, or from the unaware mind to the aware mind, we might say is potentially, a great, or even the great turning about in the whole way of our being. It's choosing to get off that treadmill, chasing the carrot in all its many forms, stepping off the treadmill, taking that silly carrot off our heads, stick, whatever it is, and stepping out into the adventure, the great adventure of consciousness and of awareness. Choosing to try, moving more and more to finding our happiness, fulfillment, security in and through becoming more aware, in and through awareness itself. We don't need a particular formulated, tightly held plan when we can entrust ourselves to awareness. Awareness can steer the ship for us. This requires courage because it means choosing to no longer just be papering over our distractions, discomfort, sense of inner emptiness, sense of lack, shame, whatever it might be. Choosing to take this courageous step to not just always be distracting ourselves from that and papering it over. And instead learning to feel, to really feel, learning to feel everything, the full range of human emotions. And this is difficult and it takes time and it can't all be done at once. But there's no other way if we want to truly be alive. I really believe that, to really be alive and to find fulfillment in this life. Punyamala is going to be exploring some of these themes in a later talk in a few weeks called Fear the Fear. Feel the fear and do it anyway. And we don't know what will emerge. We don't know what we'll discover. There's all kinds of stuff down there, isn't there, inside of us? We're waiting to find great stuff, amazing, treasures, gods, beautiful beings, oases, whatever. There might be all kinds of beautiful stuff and challenges and difficult things we'll need to face, to experience, to befriend even. But yes, there are many treasures to look forward to. So the creative life is the happy life. Happy in I don't know what sense, again, inverted commas, happy. Well, no, I do, I've got a sense, but it's a bit of a mystery as well. But yeah, the creative life, the invitation is to wonder, is the happy life. The creative mind is the happy mind, it's the fulfilled mind. And we're having a talk on this as well, I believe later on in a few weeks, called The Creative Life is the Happy Life. Yeah, not happiness in the sense of just unadulterated pleasure, but something deeper, something much more profound and subtle. Happiness comes from within, as we hear in the intro course. But what that happiness is and how we reach it is, it's much more interesting than what we might normally think. So in many ways, I think, yes, it can be helpful, even having said all that, to sometimes, if I find, drop the word happiness and just talk about it, this big mystery that we're all kind of trying to find our way towards in one way or another. Awareness is the fundamental, indispensable gateway to it. And we'll see later in the series, the practice of awareness culminates in awareness of reality, awareness of the nature of reality itself. But not just that, but participating fully in reality. So it's not like there's just this me out here being aware of reality, but we ourselves become a reality. Ourselves, awareness, reality. Where does one end? Where does the other begin? At this level, we may even get a glimpse that awareness is itself reality, is itself the deathless, but not awareness in the sense of my awareness, your awareness, but something else, a vast, what we're told is more like a vast, infinite, loving awareness that's like the sun that stands behind the clouds of our small mind, waiting to be unveiled when we're ready for it. That's me. Thank you.